Can you hear me okay with the...
Welcome to another episode of Mindset Makeovers podcast. I'm welcoming Christine into conversation with us today. I cannot wait to share her with you, and I'm really excited to have a really expansive conversation around energy healing. Welcome, Christine.
Hi, I'm so happy to be on here. Yeah.
I'm going to just fully disclose what's just happened. Christine and I are both graduates of Dharma Coaching Institute, and I'd reached out into that community saying I'm really looking for, just juicy conversations with people that just want to share themselves, their passion, their work in the world. And Christine threw her hand up straight away, and we organized this time to kind of meet. And Christine thought we were just having a meeting about the podcast recording. And I was like, no, girl, let's do it. Let's jump on live. So we literally are capturing a conversation that is unfolding in real time. So I thank you, Christine, for the courage and just showing up as you are and trusting that whatever comes through you today is going to be just perfect.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Tell us a little bit about maybe where we're catching you today and, what your work is at this moment in time.
Yeah, so I'm currently in Texas, and I started offering energy healing as a paid service earlier this year. And I offer Emotion Code, which is a way of releasing trapped emotions within our body. And trapped emotions are basically that emotional baggage that we carry with us from childhood or any other times when we didn't allow ourselves to feel into an emotion at that time, and we kind of trap it in our energy field. So it's a method to release that. And another energy healing method I do is Reiki, which probably a lot of people are familiar with, which is just another way of being a vessel of source energy and letting that flow through you as a vessel and going into the client's body, basically. And then, like you mentioned, we both graduated from Dharma Coaching Institute. So I also offer coaching as a new service just recently. And it's been really great, actually, to do that and to incorporate that into as a healing modality in a way.
What a powerful combination of modalities and offerings and healings, you are sharing with the world. I'm excited to hear more about the energy healing that you do. And I love the way you described it as kind of like clearing out the emotional baggage. In your experience, from your perspective, if somebody is aware that they are just kind of carrying the burden of emotions that have, gone unprocessed, maybe they just feel really heavy, maybe they're experiencing depression, maybe they are easily kind of reactive or triggered, do they need to know the specific emotion that they are trying to kind of get to access and work out of the body? Do you have to have that clarity around what it is to begin the energy healing?
No, so for emotion code, at least you don't have to know that. With the method that I use, I actually identify what the trapped emotions are. So for example, it's anger or bitterness or whatever it might be. So there's a chart which has about 60 emotions in there. And I use a pendulum to narrow it down, which exact emotion. And then I release it with a magnet and the intention of releasing it for the client. So we can work on, for example, if somebody does get angry really easily and they know they want to work on getting to the root of that, it's a great method to do that, but you don't have to know what emotion exactly it is, because with the method of emotion code, we do find out what the emotions are and release them.
Which I think is a really beautiful support. I know in the work that I do as a somatic activated healer, we recognize that emotions very rarely occur in the body or are presented in the body, individually. Usually they're in clusters. And through my work, what I've also realized is often the way we're relating to sensation or emotion through the body and giving it labels can actually sometimes be a little misguided. And so I'll use myself as an example. I thought I was working with releasing anger, from within me through lived experience. And the more and more I kind of, turned inward and worked with the emotional body, the more I realized that anger had kind of been the adaptive response, the protective mechanism that had formed. But actually there was shame, there was grief that I actually needed to be working with.
Yeah.
I think what you're describing is really beautiful because it asks of people to suspend the idea or belief that they actually know what's going on within the body and just allow themselves to be guided, to be supported, to be healed, you know, in a way that's a little more gentle, I feel like, than,
Yeah.
you know, allowing the inner critic to kind of dictate, like, this is what's wrong with me, this is what needs to be fixed. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I think also, like you said, a lot of times we think, oh, this is anger, but actually underneath it, there are so many other emotions that might be causing it to come out as anger, or to show up as anger. And we never really know necessarily what it is. Like the subconscious mind will know, but like usually from what my experience has been, we don't necessarily, or clients don't necessarily know right away, oh, this is why I'm feeling that way. So for example, if we're working on a relationship where somebody is holding on to resentment against somebody, like let's say a spouse, right? If we go back and we start releasing emotions, sometimes there could be emotions back from childhood that are showing up now that are causing them to feel that way, or that are getting triggered in a way, if that makes sense, in their relationship now, even though it was trapped like back in childhood. And it could be something completely different that you wouldn't even expect necessarily to be related to that resentment that you're feeling.
I know that you're a mum. Is this something that we can kind of be offering to children as well? Like, I feel like so much of what we talk about is, you know, adverse childhood experiences and the emotion being trapped there. Can we meet our children in childhood and offer them this support so, you know, that we can best support them in not having to do the heavy lifting that we're all doing now as adults in our life?
Yes, I actually use it on my daughter quite a bit, when I know that she's gone through something that could have been traumatizing to her, or even just something at school that she talks about that scared her. I sometimes use emotion code to check if there's anything trapped, or just in general, if she's been feeling a little bit off. And then also it can be used on pets as well. So that's another great method to use because it's so gentle and doesn't require talking about it, which makes it great for kids and for pets, and even like people who maybe have had bad experiences with psychologists or something like that, where they're not into that anymore.
As we're saying this, I'm wondering if you have any perspective on how we might be able to ask for consent from like children or even animals if we're going to, you know, bring our own healing modalities to them.
Yeah, so for children, I usually like I wouldn't just pick a random child or a friend's child without talking to them and do emotion code this with energy healing in general, right? You don't do energy healing on people when they don't give you consent. So I would ask like if a parent scheduled a session. For my daughter, I asked her, hey, do you want me to do like Reiki or emotion code for you? And she'll usually say yes. For pets, the owner will give consent. I feel like there's like split opinions on this, on whether you should connect energetically with the animal or the child and ask like their soul for consent. So I usually go with asking the owner, or like I mean, I wouldn't be asking an owner because they would book with me, but like for the owner to book with me, I take that as consent, for the pet, for example. And same with children, unless they're older, then I would want to know that the child actually is up for it.
Can you speak a little to how you kind of protect your own energetic field and well-being when you are working so closely with other people's emotions and energy?
Yeah, so before I have a session, I will make sure that I take some time, at least 15 minutes, to ground myself. And as well, I set intentions that, we're just releasing whatever that person needs. And I usually ask for guidance as well and call on like my angels or guides, whatever it might be. Um, but I always set the intention in the mornings that my body basically, or I just absorb whatever I need and I release everything else. So with that intention, I feel like that applies to anything like energies, chemicals, like whatever there is around us, right? Like that I only absorb and take on what I need and what is for my highest good. But then also after a session, I will make sure that I ground myself in my own body again, with myself again, and release, whatever energies I may have taken on during the session from the client, so that I don't carry that around with me.
Such an interesting thing to really consider, because I think we are aware of it, particularly in the coaching space, that we need to be mindful of energies and
Mhm.
emotions and the things that we've taken on and absorbed from our clients. But it often makes me wonder, like, as people, as beings, how often we should just be doing this in our daily lives after being out and around people and just in community and doing all of the things that we have to do as people. um, might it benefit us to be doing the same thing just as daily practice, as a way of extending like soul care to ourselves, as really amplifying what it means to be a person that takes self-care seriously? Could you give some recommendations for how we might just take care of ourselves energetically? Not because anything has happened necessarily, but just because we know that this world is a difficult place to be in, and we're bumping up against all sorts of things the moment that we, open our front door and step outside.
Yes, I think it's always great in the mornings if you have time, or even like if you didn't do it right away in the morning, like when you're in the car by yourself, or anytime when you just have a moment, even if you're at work, go to the bathroom and take a minute to just set that intention, right? I only absorb what my body needs. I release everything else. Like, it's really easy to do that, but make sure that you're actually being mindful when you're setting the intention. And at the end of the day, I always release all energies that I may have taken on and call back my own energies. And throughout the day, if you know, like, you're going into a situation where you already know the energies might be off, I would then just maybe call on support. If you believe in angels, you could call on like the archangels or whatever might resonate for you. But I also think it's so important to remind ourselves that we're the owner of our energy. And if we like shine our light brightly, right? Like, the darkness, they can't just attach. Like, I know a lot of people think, dark entities attach to you. I think that if I don't allow that, they can't attach to me. So I think it's important to remember the power you have within you, and that what you believe creates your reality. So if you walk around seeing other people kind of like as draining your energy or as projecting stuff on you, that you can just set that intention that you're not taking that on, and believing in that you don't have to take on what you don't want.
One of the things that I kind of upgraded for myself was the way that I would describe myself. And I used to say I was a very empathetic person, which I still believe I am. But I used to say empathetic almost as a badge of honor, because truthfully, I thought it was like honorable. I thought it made me sound like a really good, lovely person. But there was this kind of like subtext to being empathetic that I related to that as being somebody who really would take on somebody else's energy, and that I felt things in a way that was really heavy. And it actually was bringing me harm to speak of myself in that way. And it was
Yeah.
actually making me like physically and mentally unwell to keep kind of declaring out loud to myself and to the universe, I'm empathetic, in a way that was actually not fortifying me, strengthening me, lifting me up, but actually making me vulnerable to just feeling exposed and feeling like I was living in a world where the darkness could attach itself to me. So I've had to really kind of like reestablish the way I relate to myself, the way I'm using my language, the way that I kind of position myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, just as a being, and move through the world. And I share this because I think we have to be really careful around what we say and the intention that we're setting, even when we don't recognize like that we are intention setting. It's one thing to be like, okay, I'm setting my intention now, but we also have to be mindful of all the other things that we're saying and believing and what we're making that mean. Could you speak on that a little?
Yeah, that's so true. And it's something that like I've really like spent a lot of time thinking about too, on how we use our words, right? Because they are so powerful, and they do create, like, they just create our reality in a way. Same with our beliefs and our thoughts. So when we say I'm an empath and I feel other people so strongly, then yeah, that is what's going to happen. So I think that's why I think it's so important to remind ourselves that we have that power within us, that we are the ones who can decide what happens in a way, right? Like when you say things like I'm an empath, like labeling in general, I think you have to be very, very mindful about how you want to label yourself and really think through what your beliefs around that are. Like the empath is a really good example. I'm trying to think of something else that's a good example of that. But yeah, I think just be very, very mindful, because whatever you do believe and you do speak out, it will happen, because that is what you are creating. So when, for example, setting intentions or saying affirmations, they can be super powerful, but you want to be mindful that you're stating them in the I am, and that they use positive words. So you wouldn't want to say, I am not sick. You would instead want to say, I am healthy. And don't, like, you wouldn't want to use the not statements, but rather like the positive statements, for example.
And I think too, when it comes to affirmations, you have to be really honest with yourself around how it's actually feeling as you're stating the affirmation. You know, our affirmation can sound really positive and uplifting, but if it's only reinforcing the belief that we're trying to move away from something, and it's only kind of calling in the awareness of that thing that we're trying to avoid by stating the affirmation, then it's actually kind of counterproductive to ourselves. And I think that's why it's so important to be supported in our lives by somebody like you, Christine, that can kind of see into and feel into and recognize what's going on within us internally, despite the way we're presenting to the world and ourselves.
Yeah, and a lot of times even like limiting beliefs that we might not be aware of can, like, if I say I am healthy, I can say that like a million times, but if I'm still believing I have some kind of like condition or something, right? And I'm playing that in my mind at the same time, then the I am healthy is probably not overriding that, if I'm still believing in the condition that I think I have, or that I've been diagnosed with, or something like that.
There's, you know, it's been really beautiful that spiritual practice is shared more and more just openly and frequently online, but I worry sometimes that there's an element of performance that is kind of really, being encouraged, almost, that we're supposed to like show up and make our practice look presentable and Instagram worthy and kind of cute. And for the most part, at least the people that I'm kind of very open and honest with about our practice, there's nothing that's really cute or notable or share worthy about intimate practice that we have with ourselves and with God or source or whoever it is we feel like we're communicating with. Can you share a little? I know you said you intention set as a practice. Is there anything else that you do regularly? It doesn't have to be daily, but that you like to kind of incorporate into your life that you would consider a practice, that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I do almost every morning. I also pull like an oracle card. So there are, I think I started with like affirmation cards, or maybe they weren't even affirmation, like positive, just positive statements on there, which kind of set that tone for the day. At this point, it's oracle cards that I like to use, or angel cards. That's something I do mostly every day. And I also meditate almost every day. And that doesn't have to mean like sitting an hour in silence, but it can be just 15 minutes, either with a guided meditation in silence or whatever. I'm trying to go out in nature to just at least take a little walk or something like that. Um, and I think those are the main practices, I would say, like that are spiritual, that I do regularly. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about oracle decks? Because I often like pulling cards. It's not definitely not a daily practice. I have some decks that I like, and I just kind of let myself be intuitively kind of guided to be like, you should pull a card now. Um,
Yeah.
and I have been finding recently in a particular deck of mine that I just keep pulling the same card, like again and again, and I shuffle it, and I kind of, and more often
Mhm.
than not, at least one out of every kind of three times, I keep pulling the same card. Can you speak a little to what that means for us when we keep kind of coming into contact with the same message again and again?
I think when we're pulling the same card over and over again, it can be a sign that maybe we haven't really taken that message to heart. Like we received the message, maybe we're like resistant to whatever that message is, or like, for example, if it's like slow down or something like that, like maybe we're not really slowing down. It's like, hey, here's the card again, you need to slow down. um, Depending on what the card is, right? Like I think for myself, when that's happened, it's usually when I haven't, like when I've read it, but I haven't really taken it to heart or implemented whatever the message might be. So maybe like if you meditate, you could meditate on that message or journal on it, to kind of see if anything else comes through that helps you understand why it keeps on showing up.
I'm sitting here and laughing because I know exactly why it's showing up. It's the first time I pulled that card. I had pulled it as I sat and was beginning a new project. And that card like kind of gave me like this instant download. It was instant inspiration. And I created something that I'm now offering. And I'm the kind of person that I get easily distracted even from my own offerings, very easily inspired. So I moved to the next and moved to the next. And I feel like every time I pull this card, I'm being given the message to just like stay focused on the thing that you created. Stop making, so many other things that actually dilute you and dilute your work and dilute your energy. So I was laughing because as soon as you said that, I'm like, I don't even know why I'm asking the question. I think I'm asking for the sake of the podcast, but I know exactly, I know exactly what you are saying is definitely true for me. Mm.
Yeah, that's funny.
Now, you graduated from Dharma Coaching Institute, as did I, and it's been a really wonderful thing to be able to connect with so many other people that have graduated and are all doing different things in the world and sharing them on the podcast. Is this work, is this line of work, is witnessing yourself support people in this way something that you always knew that you would do in your life, or is it something that you've come to later on in your journey?
I actually never really knew what I wanted to do in life. So I ended up going to college, not knowing what I wanted to study. And I ended up studying business because my brothers were doing that. And I thought, well, with that, I'll always find a job, because it's pretty broad. And so I've worked a lot of different jobs, like while I was in college and before college. And even after I graduated, that's when I moved to the US. I'm originally from Germany. And I worked at a vet clinic at first while I was getting my transcripts evaluated, and then ended up in HR and even got my master's degree thinking, this is what I'll do. That's just what people do. They work their corporate job. But I always felt kind of like there must be more to it. Like this can't be all there is to life, to just work your job every day and then have 2 days on the weekend to do things that are actually fun. And I think like in 2020 or like 2021, it felt more and more like there's like a misalignment. And then earlier this year, I was finally made that decision. I had already become a Reiki master, I think the year prior, and just thought, I need to take action or else I'll just be stuck in this job for forever. And this year, I just took that action and started putting myself out there. And it feels so good to actually do something that seems to make a difference in the world or to make a difference for other people. Whereas, like, working a corporate job is just like maybe it's making a difference, but not in this kind of way. Like, anybody can just go type on the computer.
How is the misalignment that you were experiencing manifesting for you?
For me, it was just that I would get like angry about little things really easily. And I just felt like I was never like depressed or burned out or anything, but I also just felt like there has to be more. Like it just didn't feel, I don't even know how to describe it. It just felt like there was like something lacking. And when I first became a mother, that changed a lot of things for me too, because my priorities had shifted and I went to going to part-time work in my corporate job. But even that wasn't like, it still didn't feel right, even though I was already working less and having more time with my family and for the things that mattered. It's just that I think it became really clear to me that this doesn't matter to me anymore. Like doing a job that isn't making a difference, at least for my values, it's not making a difference. And just somehow it felt very clear that I knew that I have, like, I can help people heal. And there are so many other things that actually light me up, where I can feel in my body that it feels good. And I think if I don't act on that and if I don't follow that, I would just regret that when I'm old, like if I'm dying. And I know I've just stayed in a corporate job for forever. I think I would feel pretty sad about that.
Mm. What's exciting you in life at the moment? What's on the horizon for you that's pulling you in a direction that feels expansive?
I'm really excited to start coaching more on combining the healing with the coaching. I've been doing quite a few of those sessions lately, and it just feels very expansive to have that combination. And I'm actually leaving my corporate job. I had given notice back in June, but I'm still staying a few more months to help out for a few hours a week. So I'm very excited to actually fully leave and put like my whole attention into my business, which is like expansion healing, so that I can just create and like maybe create programs or whatever. I'm pretty open right now to see what's going to show up and what I want to do, but it just feels good to think about it and to work on it.
I've heard you mention a few times, like it feels good in my body. Is that a guiding light for you, a way of, you to kind of check in with self if you're headed in the right direction, that listening to the body element?
Yeah, for sure. Like there's this practice that we learned in Dharma Coaching Institute. I think you probably will know it too, how you can feel into your body if like a decision that you have to make, if it feels like constrictive or if it feels expansive. And like the expansive feeling, like when you sit down and tune into yourself, go within, and you feel that, like when I think about, for example, like healing and coaching, it feels like my heart is opening up, and it just um like as if there's like a lot of light coming from my heart space, and my body just, like I said, feels really good.
And I think I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. And I think, I just want to share, we all have to be really careful, because that moment, that clarity for some of us, if we haven't conditioned ourselves to really tune into what that feels like, or to know that, what can happen is that moment is fleeting. We get a glimpse of it. And then the conditioned mind and the inner critic and all the noise and the chatter and everything around us, gets louder. And we hear that instead of the quiet whisper sometimes that it is saying, like, come on, come this way. And so I just want to make that clear. If you're kind of expecting it to be this big hand of God that reaches down and grabs you and moves you somewhere else, for some people it's probably that clear, but for most of us, we have to spend a little more time kind of tuning ourselves as the instrument that can actually hear that guidance, hear that wisdom, and then believe it for ourselves too, right?
Yeah, and I think like once you start, like if it's meditation or if it's just even sitting with yourself for 5 minutes and just knowing what your center feels like, that's a really good practice to kind of know. And then when you have to think about the decision, it's so much easier to feel if it feels good or if it doesn't feel good. And same, maybe if that's not your thing, journaling is a really good way too. I think if you're just journaling, letting anything flow out without judgment, whatever it is, even if it seems stupid at the time, you just write it all out. Because, like you said, it's not necessarily like you seeing like an angel telling you this is what you should do. And yes, there are some people who have that experience, but that's not my experience, where I'm being told that way specifically.
The other unsexy thing that I want to say while we're having this conversation is that for some of us, if we've been feeling kind of just like low or despondent or just turned off by life, sometimes we crave the complete opposite. Like we want to be fully turned on, we want to be really excited. And so we search and seek an experience or, a vision that will fulfill that desire that we have. But I think ultimately what we have to do for ourselves is get to center, as you said, Christine, find that baseline, find what it is for us when we just feel neutral, when we feel okay, when we're just satisfied in a way that actually is really life affirming. We're not turned off, we're not turned all the way on. We find that part of us that is just at ease, present in the moment, and we spend a lot of time in the experience of that for self, so that we can notice when we're, hyper aware or hyper excited by something we need to pay attention to, because it's not always in our best interest to follow that straight away, like, like a dog with a bone kind of just chasing after things. And we also want to make sure that we're not allowing ourselves to be pulled in the other direction, where we're just taken by, negativity or fear or the inner critic or whatever it is. And we have to find that place within ourselves where we feel like, hey, this is what it is when I'm at ease within myself. I'm connected to the present moment. I'm just allowing whatever arises to be there, and I'm learning how to bring acceptance and awareness and observation. I'm fine-tuning all of those skills for myself so that I can actually trust that whatever move I make from this point has been made from that place of self, of groundedness, of clarity, of knowing myself as best as I can in this moment, rather than making decisions when we feel one way or the other, which usually has us just like ping-ponging through life and constantly trying to make up for the rebound when we miss the mark, rather than just, slowing down that little bit, taking the time to slow down, taking the time to be with self and know self and unlearn everything that hasn't been self before we make our next move. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just think that's so important what you just said. And also, I just want to add, like, when you do find that what excites you and lights you up, that still doesn't mean you're always going to be like turned on and everything's always going to be amazing, right? You're still going to have times where you're like, feel like low or whatever. Like, it's not necessarily always going to be all sunshine.
It's such an important thing to know, because sometimes we judge ourselves in the experience of it as we're learning how to relate to our purpose as well. I know for a lot of what I do within my work and a lot of the ways I'm witnessing myself in devotion to my purpose and my work, there's been a whole lot of resistance around it. There have been these parts of me that are like, oh my God, do I really have to show up in this way? Do I really have to get to this new edge? Do I really have to do the thing? And if I related to resistance as being a handbrake on my life or my purpose, if I expected everything just to feel easy and effortless, then I think I would very much miss the path that I'm being guided to take. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so many times when we're going through those like downs too, that's where we have all that growth. And I think there's always going to be ways to grow and ways to process things that maybe we still have suppressed or that come up for whatever reason that we haven't looked at yet. And I think that's actually a really good thing. And starting a business actually is such a great way to get down into those parts that you need to still heal or work on, whatever it might be.
Think anybody with a business of their own, or trying to kind of, bring about a vision for themselves and their business to life, is like nodding with you, like, oh yes. It's a masterclass in inner work, isn't it, on a daily basis?
Yeah. Yeah.
Christine, if people want to connect with you online, find out more about what you do, if they're interested in Reiki or energy healing or just getting to know you, where's the best place to find you?
I'm on Instagram at expansion_healing. And then I also have a website, which is www.expansion-healing.com.
Thank you so much. I will make sure that we get all of that information. We include it in the show notes, and I encourage everybody that has been magnetized to this episode today to go ahead and connect with you and welcome you into their world too. Thank you so much for your energy and your time and your brilliance today. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much, too. This was such a great conversation.